Welcome to this Bradley Prizes edition of Conceived in Liberty, a Bradley Speaker Series. I'm Rick Graber, president of the Bradley Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us. Parents have never been more engaged in school curricula as they are now, and much of the focus has been on American history. Our guest today believes that the weaponization of history is damaging to our sense of who we are as a country and has serious implications for our future. Bill McClay holds the Victor Davis Hanson Chair in Classical History and Western Civilization at Hillsdale College. Prior to that, he was the G.T. and Libby Blankenship Chair in the History of Liberty at the University of Oklahoma and the director of the Center for the History of Liberty. His most recent book, Land of Hope, An Invitation to the Great American Story, provides an informative and inspiring account of our country's past. And Bill is also a 2022 Bradley Prize winner. Bill, congratulations and welcome. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much on both counts. I'm honored and kind of stunned. I'm still reeling from the prize, but I'm happy to have that recognition of the work, and that's the important thing.
Well, terrific, and we really look forward to celebrating your selection in the not too distant future. Thanks so much for being here today. So let's continue along that line. I mean, obviously, Bill, there's some divisions in our country over how history is taught. Really does seem to be a product of the current political and culture wars. What's the danger in weaponizing history?
Well, there's a lot of dangers. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is that once we become aware that history can be used as a weapon, it loses its value as history. It loses its value as a kind of independent point of reference for ourselves. That it gives us nourishment. It gives us a sense of where we come from and where we want to be going. It gives us something to compare ourselves to. If we think that the present age is the age of ultimate truths and look back at the past and see that others before us were in some respects wiser than we are, it's humbling. And we should do that. We should look back and gain from that experience. So that's one of the ways that I think the weaponizing of history is it pollutes public discourse too, in that it robs public discourse of the kind of relatively I won't say disinterested, but unengaged perspective that history done rightly offers. When we see history presented as nothing but a legal brief in favor of some particular policy of the president and omitting all the complexity of real life, then I think the tendency is to think that all that matters is the creation of legal briefs, and there is no rich, deep, complicated background as a backdrop of our lives, and frankly, when everything's is reduced to this kind of struggle, we lose the sense, and this is really important, of how we are still one people, even if we're fighting with one. I'm on the Semi-Quincentennial Commission, which is planning the 250th anniversary of the country. And it's a pretty fractious group, as you can imagine. But one of the appeals I have made, which seems to have gotten a little bit of traction, is why don't we think of this as, instead of arguing over whether this should be a commemoration, a celebration, a wake, we've had suggestions like that from some committee members. Let's think of it as being like a family reunion in the sense, one of those enormous family reunions in which, all corners of the globe, the Smiths or whatever they are, they come rolling in, and there are those who are not on speaking terms. There are those who hide in the corners, participating with their own group. That's what happens, but they're all there. They're all there, and they're all willing to say, we are in some sense a family, a fractious family, but we are that.
No, that's just for the record. I think those of us at the Bradley Foundation would argue for a celebration.
Well, that's what I
At this
argued
family
for.
reunion.
And,
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. Bill, many leaders from America's past engaged in activities or exhibited behaviors that by today's standards would be unacceptable. What's your take on this movement to tear down statues and rename buildings of historical figures who fit this description?
well, look, I have actually, my feelings are a little bit mixed. I think the people have a right to rethink in an orderly and deliberate way what monuments they want to have, what ways they want to recognize the past. But that's about as far as I'll go on that side. But they need to have some sense that the dead have a vote too in this, that the dead are in some way participating in the arrow in time that is our national and regional and civic life. So when you blot out a monument, you blot out a memory. The biggest problem with that kind of thing is that it robs us of a sense that our heroes can be flawed. Because that's the only kind there are. There are no unflawed heroes. Thomas Jefferson, a very great man, whose words have rung out and continue to, and have done in the last few months over all the world. We all remember people carrying copies of the Declaration of Independence and models of the Statue of Liberty in China back at the Tiananmen time. Yeah, there are, and there are many other great things to say about Jefferson. There are flaws, and they are not small. Although, if we have the generosity to look at people in the context of their times, which a lot of times we don't have that and don't want to extend that, his sins are a little bit less culpable. And in fact, Jefferson should deserve some credit for being tortured about slavery. He had come to the conclusion, really a kind of an advanced conclusion for his time, that slavery was a moral evil. He just couldn't see his way to parting from it being implicated. Is it better to have been completely blind to the evils of slavery? I think not. I think he deserves credit even for that. He doesn't get it these days. He doesn't get credit for much of anything. And I think there are many sayings to the effect that the measure you give is the measure you will receive. And it's sort of a golden rule kind of adage. And we need to be measured in our understanding of the past if we're to expect to receive something like measured treatment in the future.
And let's do a little forward looking. I mean, this country has seen its share of turmoil from the revolutionary period on. We survived a civil war, became stronger in its aftermath. We recovered from the Great Depression, the social unrest of the 1960s. But the state of our country just seems to be headed in the wrong direction in a way that we haven't seen before. Maybe it's just being in the time right now. I don't know. But would you agree with that? And do you think we'll come out ahead as we have after previous contentious periods?
I don't know. I don't know whether it's worse. That's very hard for me to judge. I mean, I think that what may be worse about it is that there's such a almost catastrophic loss of morale in the country. And I think the foreign policy debacles of the past year or so, we could go back to January of 2021, maybe, a convenient place, but certainly the debacle in Afghanistan. I wake up at night and I just feel a sort of sense of horror at all of that. And there's a lack of confidence in even the most fundamental aspects of our national ideals. The 1619 Project of the New York Times has been enormously destructive in this regard, in emphasizing in a way that's actually intellectually incoherent that in some way the slaves persons brought to Jamestown amounted to a foundation of the country, even though none of those people became slaves. They were indentured servants, eventually got their freedom. It's so incoherent, it's so sloppy, and yet because of the reach of the New York Times, it's had an effect. And I don't know any reputable historians who will defend it, but they won't come out against it. What I'm saying is that this is part of the loss of morale. We've lost a sense of confidence in the overall goodness of what we are, of what we represent in human history. And we've got to stop that. We've got to, one way I put it is, we've got to become a serious nation again. We've got to become serious about the responsibilities to ourselves, to our children, to the world that come with all the blessings that we have, which is so neglectful of all that. And I think we have to reverse it. I didn't really want to write a textbook. The wonderful thing is that the book has been so well received by older readers. Most of the sales have come from trade sales to older readers, not to schools. It's just beginning to make its way in the school. But I do feel as if we need to recover our story. And that story doesn't have to be a simple story, but we need to have it. Because in the absence of our story, our real story, the real story of America, we're going to have half-baked, pernicious, destructive stories. I call them the inglorious stories.
Yes.
The inglorious stories will come creeping in. And with young people, this is really, could be quite deadly. I'm and I don't mean that only in a metaphor.
Yes.
I look at the statistics about youth suicide, depression, drug abuse, alcohol, all of that, and many other things about the rising generation. And this COVID madness with schools has only made it worse. We're raising a generation of emotional cripple who are especially crippled by the loss of a national story, which is a place you can go to begin to think about things larger than yourself.
Bill, we've got time for one last question, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what's it mean to you to be a Bradley Prize winner?
Oh my goodness! Well, I think of all the others that and in fact, I've been thinking about the speech that I need to make, and there are about 7 Bradley Prize winners whom I'm thinking about quoting, Leon Kass, a bunch of others, and it's a true cloud of witnesses in a way of what's best in American intellectual, political, policy life. You've been very, very selective about that. I'm not going to say you made a mistake with me, but I'm still stunned and to find myself in this company. I feel like Lou Gehrig giving his speech about how this is the greatest day of his life. I do feel so grateful to be. Look, the 2 men I'll be sharing the stage with are heroes to me. Glenn Lowry, I've known, not well, but I've known him a long time. And Glenn's gone through a lot of up, I won't say ups and downs, but that's true too. But I mean, he is intellectually, I don't know anybody who has been more willing to change his mind and constantly seeking, constantly probing, constantly looking for the truth. And Cheng, I just, I'm in awe. He's been a hero ever since I've been aware of him, and been aware of the horrors of that regime and how it's become, how many mistakes we have made, in our dealings with them and allowed ourselves to be in a position that is approaching dire in terms of regaining our prominence, our confidence in the world. I can't believe how good it feels to be with such people.
That's great. And you are all incredibly well-deserving. Bill McClay, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. And thanks for the incredible contribution that you're making to setting the record straight on our country's history. Really has been a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. And I'm going to keep at it.
And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us on this episode of Conceived in Liberty.